Good day and welcome to Alena Media TV. We are broadcasting from Toronto, Canada. I am Elsa Abraham, and in this episode we are bringing you African news. Here is your headlines. Ethiopian forces massacre in Tigray. And in our next story, Egyptian president, we must reach legal agreement on Ethiopian dam. Let's go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll get our news in details. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back from that short break. Now, Eritrean armed forces massacred scores of civilians, including children as young as 13, in the historic town of Axum in Ethiopia's Tigray region in November 2020. Human Rights Watch said today that the United Nations should urgently establish an independent inquiry into war crimes and possible crimes against humanity in the reach to pave the way for accountability, and Ethiopian authorities should grant it full and immediate access. On November 19th, Ethiopian and Eritrean forces indiscriminately shelled Axum, killing and wounding civilians for a week about taking control of the town. The forces shot civilians and pillaged and destroyed property, including healthcare facilities. After Tigray militia and Axum residents attacked Ethiopian Eritrean forces on November 28th, Eritrean forces in apparent retaliation fatally shot and summarily executed several hundred residents, mostly men and boys, over a 24-hour period. Eritrean troops committed heinous killings in Axum with wanton disregard for civilian lives, said Letitia Bida, of African Director of Human Rights Watch. Ethiopian and Eritrean officials can no longer hide behind the curtain of denial, but should allow space for justice and redress, not add to the layers of trauma that survivors already face. The attacks on Axum followed weeks of fighting between the Ethiopian military and allied forces from the Amara region and Eritrean troops against forces affiliated with the region's former ruling party, the Tigray People's Liberation Front. Between December 2020 and February 2021, Human Rights Watch interviewed by phone 28 witnesses and victims of abuses and their relatives in Axum and examined videos of attacks and their aftermath. Survivors consistently identified Eritrean troops by vehicle bearing Eritrean license plates, their distinctive uniforms, the spoken dialect of Tigrinya, and their plastic Congo shoes worn by Eritrean forces since the liberation struggle. On November 19, after Tigrinian forces and militia withdrew from Axum, Ethiopia and Eritrea forces began shelling the town around 4 p.m., continuing into the evening. The next day, witnesses saw that Ethiopian and Eritrean forces indiscriminately shoot at civilians, including the town's St. Mary's Hospital. The next day, witnesses saw Ethiopian and Eritrean forces indiscriminately shoot at civilians, including in the town of St. Mary's Hospital. For about a week, the military forces pillaged, while several residents who spoke to Human Rights Watch saw Ethiopian forces participate. Most said that the soldiers just stood by and watched. It was painful, someone said. I thought the Ethiopian military stood by for Ethiopia and its people, but they did nothing as Eritrean forces looted and killed. They just kept silence. The abuses generated considerable anger in the town. On November 28th, after 7 a.m., a group of Tigrayan militia and town residents attacked Eritrean forces, triggering fighting. That afternoon, Eritrean reinforcements entered Axum and went on a 24-hour killing spree. Survivors described the horror of Eritrean soldiers moving from the town, going house to house, searching for young men and boys and executing them. A student described watching helplessly as Eritrean soldiers led 6 neighbors, including a 70-year-old the witness knew as Jumbo, and another young man outside, he said. They made them take off their belts, then their shoes. They lined them up and walked behind them. The Eritrean soldiers fired their guns. The first 3 of them fell. They fired other shots and the other 3 also fell. Eritrean troops shoot other civilians on the street. A group of soldiers killed a man and then forced a pregnant woman and 2 children that were with him to kneel on the asphalt street beside his body, said one witness. Those retrieving bodies for burial did not escape harm. Several residents said Eritrean forces shot at them while they tried to collect the dead on November 28th and 29th. The massacre left the town's inhabitants reeling. One man visited a relative who lost her children in the house-to-house killing. They killed her children and locked the compound door behind them, so no one could get in at first. She was left alone with the bodies of her 2 dead children for a day and a half. She was numb, unresponsive by the time we saw her. Human Rights Watch was unable to determine the number of civilian deaths resulting from the joint Ethiopian-Eritrean offensive, Axum, and the ensuing massacre. However, based on interviews with elders, community members collecting identification cards of those killed, and those assisting the retrieval of the body, Human Rights Watch estimates that over 200 civilians were most likely killed on November 28th and 29th alone. Human Rights Watch also received a list of 166 names of victims allegedly killed in Axum in November, 21 of which correspond to the names of those killed on November 28th and 29th, given by a witness interviewed. International humanitarian law, or the laws of war applicable to the armed conflict in Ethiopia's Tigray region, prohibits deliberate attacks on civilians and attacks that are indiscriminate or cause disproportionate civilian harm. Indiscriminate attacks strike military objectives and civilians or civilian objects without distinction, including those not directed at a specific military target. The laws of war also prohibit all violence against captured combatants and civilians, including murder and torture. Pillage and looting are also prohibited. Individuals who commit serious laws of war violations with criminal intent, including as a matter of command or responsibility, are liable for war crimes. Crimes against humanity include murder and other unlawful acts committed as part of the widespread of systematic attack on a civilian population. The late November attacks were documented by media organizations as well as by Amnesty International. The Ethiopian Human Rights Commission has also begun investigations. Human Rights Watch provided its findings to Ethiopian and Eritrean government officials on February 18th, but received no response. On February 26th, the Ethiopian government announced it will thoroughly investigate events in Axum and expressed readiness to collaborate with international human rights experts. Now, moving on to our second story for today. Ethiopian President. Egyptian President, we must reach legal agreement on Ethiopian dam. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi affirmed Egypt's position on the imperative to reach a binding legal agreement regarding filling and operating the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the GERD. The president expressed Egypt's support for all efforts done to promote peace and stability in Sudan during this pivotal stage in its history. He said that the security of Sudan is an integral part of Egypt's stability. In a meeting with Miriam al-Mahdi, Sudanese Minister of Foreign Affairs, both parties agreed to intensify mutual coordination during the coming period regarding the GERD issue. LCC stressed Egypt's strategic approach to supporting all aspects of bilateral relations with Sudan during his meeting with al-Mahdi, said Bassam Radi, a presidency spokesperson. This is aimed at consolidating the eternal partnership and relations between the people of the Nile River. LCC confirmed Egypt's interest in strengthening bilateral relations with Sudan, especially in the fields of trade exchange. He highlighted Egypt's readiness to continue transferring its experience in economic reform and training Sudanese cadres. Al-Mahdi expressed Sudan's aspiration to develop cooperation between the two countries, appreciating the Egyptian support to preserve the safety and stability of Sudan. Sources revealed that the Egyptian president will visit Sudan next Saturday on an official visit. He will hold talks with the chairman of Sudan's Sovereign Council, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, to discuss the dam, the border crisis between Sudan and Ethiopia, and other bilateral issues. Meanwhile, the chief of staff of the Egyptian Armed Forces, Mohammed Farid, arrived in Khartoum on Monday, heading a high-level military delegation for a meeting during the 7th meeting of the joint Ethiopian-Sudanese Military Committee in Khartoum. The chiefs of staff of both countries signed a military agreement to enhance regional security and cooperation. Farid said that the level of military cooperation with Sudan is unprecedented. He also indicated that Egypt is ready to meet all of Sudan's demands in military issues because the two countries face common challenges. The Egyptian Minister of Foreign Affairs and his Sudanese counterpart held a meeting in Cairo. They discussed a number of issues with the JERD on top of the agenda. This is where we end today's episode on African News. Please like, share, comment. Let us know your thoughts on this particular episode. Thanks for watching.